About, I'm just asking for one of our other fellow reporters about the summer jobs program that you started. Yes. Where is that now, and then how many kids, I guess, do you anticipate to get involved in that for the summer to kind of keep them preoccupied? Because I believe today is the last day of school for a lot of the students in the public schools.
Many of the kids have already started applying, and many of the kids have already been interviewed, and many have received jobs already. Of course, the city started off with about 450, and then with the jobs coming from the private sector, we may have added in a short period of time another maybe 1,500 or so, based on what's coming from the private sector: McDonald's, Jack in the Box, not Jack in the Box, Whataburger, Walgreens. There was a Simeon company.
Siemens.
Which one?
Siemens.
Siemens. Okay, Siemens. They, for example, they committed to 130 jobs at $10 an hour instead of the $8. So we've had excellent success. We still certainly are asking for companies, employers, businesses who may be able to hire, have a desire to hire, to do so. If the cost is $3,000 per summer, but it's significantly more than where we started. We may not be able to reach that 5,000 mark that I hope to achieve. So I think we'll probably, at the end of the day, we'll probably be close to where Dallas is. Dallas program is about 2,000, and at the end of the day, we'll probably be close to it.
And you think that helps, I guess, keep kids out of trouble in the summer? Or?
Without doubt. I mean, these are kids who otherwise would have been on the streets or roaming the streets. This enables them to work for their money, to get money in their own pockets that they can pay for their school supplies and clothes and things of that nature, or even help out in their own household. So no, it's a tremendous plus to establish that work ethic that's desperately needed. And let me also say that this does not count, because what we were hearing from other businesses and companies, they have their own program. So this is not counting their programs. That just not falling under the City of Houston's operation. The medical center, for example, medical center has its own program. So when we contacted them, they've got their own deal, and this number does not count what they are doing. But I think there have been many other entities and companies based on us putting the initiative or doing their own, putting forth their own summer youth program, and that's fine. We've gotten support from the White House. The White House has been making calls to banks and businesses in our area, encouraging people to participate. And we also have what do we call this person from the White House? What do we call it? Like a facilitator.
Liaison.
Liaison facilitator from the White House that's on the ground here in Houston, working with us on the summer youth program. So we got off to a late start on it, but I think based on what we've done, I think we made significant improvement, and as a result, I think at least a couple thousand kids will have jobs that they otherwise would not have had.
Can you comment on this folks, a group of citizens on the drainage and TERS 17? They filed a lawsuit today against the city, saying you guys need to do more. What can you say about that, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I haven't seen or read the lawsuit. I've heard about the lawsuit. You know, flooding is a major concern for me. I mean, I've taken the steps to name the flooding czar, Steve Costello, and so we're working on that. We finished, we've named some people to TERS 17, and I know now they have approved their budget. I think that budget has been approved as it relates to TERS 17. So steps are taking place. I made it very clear from day one that flooding is a high priority, and I intend to make it a high priority, lawsuit or no lawsuit. And there are many areas in the city of Houston that are flooding now. Based on what happened on April the 18th, the Greenspoint area, which is not in TERS 17, the Greenspoint area flooded. They hadn't flooded in a long time. Over on the other side of Antoine, in my quarter where I live, that area hadn't flooded since 2001. But to the north of Antoine, the Chateau Forest, they flooded. So flooding in the Bayou City is a major concern, and it's something that we need to address. And what I've charged Steve Costello with is the task of coming up with short-term and long-term measures to mitigate the risk of flooding. But I will never make, lawsuit or no lawsuit, I will never make the representation that, that we can take steps to totally eliminate flooding. That's not in our control. But the city will do everything that it can to mitigate the risk of flooding.
And the group itself, just one more question on that. The group itself, it's been around for a few years. They complain regularly about this issue, certainly. But they're now saying, I guess, developers have been given a pass over the years about contributing actively to solving some of the problem. They felt like City Hall's turned a deaf ear to the citizens' concerns. Do you feel like City Hall's turned a deaf ear, or developers are getting a pass?
Not under my administration. I've gone out and I've visited with TER 17, and I visited with many of the, I guess, the citizens out there, resident property owners that are not the big commercial establishments or developers. Look, there's no respect of persons. Communities are flooding, and it's our desire to keep them from flooding or to mitigate the risk of flooding. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you are a John Doe resident or you are this huge property owner. The reality is, when it starts to flood, it really doesn't have any respect of any respect of persons. I think what people want to see us doing the very best we can to mitigate the risk, and they certainly don't want us siding with one special interest as opposed to their interest. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one special interest, and that's the interest of people of the city of Houston as a whole. And that's going to be the emphasis of this administration, to take every conceivable step to mitigate the risks of flooding. And I'm willing to work with any group, and I will work with them, lawsuit or no lawsuit. But this is not about trying to establish a fault with anyone. This city, it does flood.
One quick follow-up on that. To phrase it a different way, on the campaign trail, since you've been in office, as you said, lawsuit or no lawsuit, to what extent have you thought that changes maybe could or should be made in the way the city regulates stormwater, right? You know, the rules governing new development in any area.
Well, that's one of the responsibilities of Steve Costello, is to work with developers, work with the super neighborhoods, work with the Harris County Flood Control District, Harris County, the U.S. Corps of Engineers, elected officials at all levels. You know, I think one of the biggest challenges is just not having that collaboration of all of these different components. I think that's what's important, and the lack of funding. And that's why I have lent my support to Congressman Al Green, to Congressman Gene Green, in trying to pull down the $311 million from the Fed that would fund many of the flooding projects in our city that would make us more resilient. And so I support that. And I've talked with John Culberson about trying to work with getting the additional funding for Project Braze. They're needing about $34 million. That project has been delayed to 2021, should have been completed in 2016. And so I'm heading to DC in June to meet with the entire congressional delegation. So those are steps that are taking place. And so that people would have a point-to person to go to, instead of having to work through Public Works. Steve Costello is now the flooding czar. He's the point person. You can go directly to him and kind of work in collaboration with him. So I think even in a short period of time, we've taken some very definitive steps to move the dime as it relates to flooding. But we've got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And we'll continue to work at it. That's lawsuit or no lawsuit. But I can't stand here and say to you that we have favored one group as opposed to another. When you look at the different parts of the city that's flooding as of April the 18th, what do you say about what happened in Greenspoint? Yeah. Who were we favoring back then? Okay. Or what do we say about what happened at Chateau Forest in Northwest Houston? Who were we favoring back then? Yeah. So people are angry. They don't want their homes flooded 2, 4, 6, 7 times. I got that. I understand that. But instead of fighting a lawsuit, let's put our efforts into trying to mitigate the risk of flooding. And I would gladly meet with anybody out there who want to sit down and make a determination of whether or not we